What is up, everyone? If you're under 1500 ELO, you're going to want to watch this video right to the end because we're going to cover the 3 most common mistakes made by players under 1500 ELO, as well as the antidote to those mistakes so that you can improve your play and get above 1500. Why listen to me? Well, my name's Philip and I'm a 2100 FIDE rated player from New Zealand, and I've been through the lower ranks of play, and I've worked my way up, and I've seen these mistakes happen over and over and over. And believe me when I say it, mistake number 1, plain and simple, is missing easy tactics. So before we go into the first one, I'll just rattle off the 3 mistakes. Missing easy tactics, number 1. Mistake number 2, trading down into losing or worse endgames. And mistake number 3, drum roll, is getting emotional in your games. So let's go right from the top. Missing easy tactics. What do I mean by easy tactics? Well, let's just take this position as an example. It's a Spanish opening. Let's say in this position, white wants to play the move d4, which is the natural move, but he's afraid that black is going to take on e4. But plain and simply, white can still play this because there's no threat of black taking on e4, because if you look a couple of moves ahead, black's knight on c6 is hanging. Furthermore, if let's say we go back to this type of a position, if it was black to move, white has this move here, bishop d5, forking the 2 knights. So that pawn on e4 is never under attack. But someone under 1500, while they're analyzing the game, it might not be the quickest tactic that they're going to find, and they'll probably play a defensive move like d3 to protect the pawn, whereas they could have just plain and simply gone d4 rather, and progressed with a better way of improving their position. Mistake number 1, again, missing easy tactics. Here's an example between Zapata and Vishwanathan Anand. Vishwanathan Anand is black, and he lost in about 6 moves here in a Petrov defense. You think, how does Vishwanathan Anand, former world champion, lose as black in 6 moves in the Petrov? Well, plain and simply, Zapata played knight c3, Vishwanathan Anand played bishop f5, and this is the type of blunder you'd see at a below 1500 ELO rating, but queen e2. And that's it. The game is lost, because how are you going to defend this knight? If you defend it with something like queen e7, knight d5 comes, followed by an attack here, and black's position is collapsing. So just such a simple tactic. A 1500 would look at this and be like, okay, cool, I'm defending my knight with bishop c5. But just a couple of moves ahead, if you look at that and think, okay, cool, I'm still defending it, therefore queen e7 works, and therefore bishop f5 works. But no, you have to continue looking at these easy tactics, because those are the tactics you'll miss as a 1500. And last but not least, d4, d5, let's say a queen's gambit decline type position with a bishop b4, bishop g5, c6, h3, or even, let's just say e3, queen a5, and suddenly black is applying some pressure on c3, and if white doesn't read the situation correctly, which is black is now threatening that g5 bishop as well, because if white plays rook c1, then suddenly knight e4, that bishop's under attack, that knight's under attack. If you play something like queen d3, well, you're just going to lose by knight takes, takes, queen here. So those are the types of moves that 1500 players will not necessarily see. They'll play something like rook c1 to defend that. First and foremost, black has that move if he wants to win a pawn straight away, but even better is just to start applying pressure to the position with knight e4, and suddenly white's position is on move 7 starting to fall apart pretty quickly. just by observing these tactics, just by analyzing the position a bit better, you can get around these mistakes. So what's the solution to this? Well, plain and simply, if you're studying for an exam or a test, what you want to do is you want to practice past papers or just practice questions that come up. Likewise, for chess, you want to practice hundreds of puzzles per week. And I'm not exaggerating when I say hundreds. You could probably get through 100 puzzles every 2 hours, say. That's a reasonable amount of time, so 50 puzzles per hour. If you dedicate 2 to 4 to 6 hours per week on puzzles, you will find your rating increases pretty quickly, because once you do those mate in 3s, mate in 4s, mate in 6s, or those white to play and win, black to play and win, white to play and draw, black to play and draw, those types of puzzles, and you just get the reps in, you will find that your ability to spot tactics increases so quickly, but you need to get the practice in. So number one mistake, missing easy tactics, and number one way to solve it is really just put in the hours, practice puzzles, and you will get there. So mistake number 2, trading down into losing endgames. So let's take a look at this position. It's pretty equal. There's not much happening. If in this type of a situation, let's just say, for argument's sake, somehow the pieces get traded here and and then you've got those knights and bishops traded. Probably not the best example to go over, but let's just say those are traded, and then black just aimlessly starts trading pieces, because what happens under 1500 is players tend to aimlessly trade pieces for no apparent reason, but just they seem to think that if there's a trade to be made, then I should make the trade. That's wrong. You should always ask yourself, does this trade benefit me or my opponent? And then also, what do I plan to do with my remaining pieces? So now, as black, you've got a rook and a bishop remaining. What do I plan to do with these pieces? Well, as black, my bishop's locked in. Does it have any targets? Nope. So this bishop already has no massive prospects. This rook, what's that going to be doing? Well, that's actually going to be having to move to the A file to protect against white's outside passed pawn, because white's going to start marching this pawn up the position, and he's going to start marching his king up the position. That outside passed pawn gives white the advantage in this type of a position. So black does not want to just aimlessly trade pieces off, because he will find himself in a position where he's got a worse endgame. It could be still pretty equal, but that outside passed A pawn gives white the only chances to win this game. Cool, so let's look at another example. This one here. So again, equal material, but black's got this pretty horrible pawn structure here. He's got weaknesses here. White's got a really nice pawn structure, no weaknesses. Black's also got some weaknesses on these light squares, with the pawns being on g7 and h6. White goes queen e5, and now the worst thing you could do as black is, again, you got to pause here and think, why does white want to trade queens? Does a queen trade benefit me or benefit white? Well, when you've got this many weaknesses in your position, you want to keep the queens on the board, because if you keep the queens on the board, even if you're 1 or 2 pawns down, you will find ways to create problems for your opponent later in the game. So it's not going to be an easy win for the opponent, and you're going to find ways of producing counterplay. But if you say, okay, cool, I'm just going to trade queens because for the sake of it, you'll find yourself very quickly struggling to defend this c6 pawn. This a7 pawn is going to come under fire when this rook goes onto this file. That c7 pawn's weak, the e6 pawn's weak. Your king can't even come into the game that easily because the f7 square is taken. And if you just continue playing on, let's say, I don't know, rook, oops, let's say you move your rook to e8, knight takes here, you can't even move your rook to b8, you're going to have to go something like a6. The other rook's going to come in, and what do? You're just on the defensive here as black, and white's just going to start marching his king into the position. He's a pawn up, and you've just entered a worse endgame because white's essentially going to apply even more pressure to these pawns, win a second pawn, maybe even win a third pawn, trade rooks, trade knights, and then just have a winning king and pawn endgame. And that comes to the final point of mistake number 2, which is you want to practice playing various endgames against the engine on low strength. So what do I mean by various endgames? I mean pawn and king endgames, or rook and pawn and king endgames. Various setups, various mating patterns, 2 bishops versus a king, no other pieces, just checkmating the opponent's king. Basic checkmating patterns. You want to practice those, just like we said, you want to practice puzzles and hundreds of puzzles per week to improve your vision for tactics. You want to get your endgame play as clean as possible, so that when you're trading pieces, if the first litmus test is passed, which is, does this trade benefit me or my opponent, and why, and what's the activity of my remaining pieces, what is the value of my remaining pieces? If you say, yep, this trade benefits me, yep, the pieces that I've got remaining after these trades are in really good shape, what does the endgame look like? Well, if you're in a better position, you want to know how to convert that endgame rather than your opponent defending it and then you end up drawing. You want to win every single game that you play, and that's how you get better. You want to practice endgames. And then last but not least, mistake number 3, getting emotional. So we're just going to, for getting emotional, we're going to go and wipe off the board completely, because at the end of the day, when we play, it's an emotional roller coaster. And I've played in tournaments for years. I've played national tournaments. I've played club tournaments. The games never get easier, but you get better in terms of managing your emotions throughout the game. And what kind of emotions can a typical chess player face? Well, first and foremost, you need to understand that not every game is going to go your way. And when a game starts slipping away from you, so you're winning and then you start losing, or your opponent starts creating too much chaos, and you start panicking like, crap, is my opponent going to get away with this, or am I even going to lose from a winning position? You need to remember to breathe, compose yourself, and then just play the best move that you can. Because ultimately, chess is just about stringing move after move after move. You might be in a position where you don't like a single move in front of you. You still have to play a move. You can't pass, That's why zigzagging is so powerful in endgames, right? So you just take a step back, breathe, compose yourself. If you feel the heat coming on, you still have to play a move. So just compose yourself and put your best foot forward. If you've been winning and now you're starting to struggle and start losing, recognize, okay, maybe I am losing the position now. So stop pushing for a win. Start thinking about how to shore up your defenses. You got to adjust the way you think throughout the game and not get too emotional, not get panicked and flustered when your opponent starts to turn the game around, because that can happen. That happens from time to time. Another way we can get emotional is when you're playing a weaker opponent, we start thinking we're invincible and how can we ever lose to this weaker opponent? Well, newsflash, you can, and you will from time to time lose to weaker opponents. They are capable of beating you. So you want to remove your ego. You want to treat your opponent with respect at all times. And again, it comes down to just take the emotion out and play the best move that you can. Not go in thinking, okay, I'm just going to beat this guy in 10 moves or 20 moves and go for a kingside attack and sacrifice my knight, sacrifice my rook, and then, oh, whoops, I've got no material left and my attack's over and I'm losing the game. You don't want to do that. Just take it easy. Enjoy the game, enjoy the process, play the best move that you can. Your opponent might be weaker than you, but they're still capable of beating you. And on the flip side, when you're playing a stronger opponent, remove your fear, because you're also capable of beating them. just play your moves, move by move. Just try to play the best move you can. Don't get emotional. Don't let fear get in your way. And just, again, it's a blank board in front of us right here because we're playing ourselves at the end of the day. It's a game. It's a competitive game. You're playing your opponent, but you are playing yourself mentally. And you just want to keep a calm state of mind and get through your games that way. So just to recap, mistake number 1, missing easy tactics. Puzzles, puzzles, puzzles. Practice those puzzles. Mistake number 2, trading down into losing end games. Before trading pieces, think, is this trade going to benefit me? And also practice your end games so that you know whichever end game you trade into, you're comfortable that you'll understand how to play this end game. It just takes time and practice. Play against the engine. Last but not least, getting emotional. Calm yourself down, breathe, compose yourself. You're playing against yourself. Ignore who you're playing against. It doesn't really matter. Your job, you've got one job. It's just to play the best move you can in that position. After your opponent moves, play the best move you can in that position. At the end of the day, you'll win some, you'll lose some, but you just fix these mistakes slowly. Your rating will go 1500, 1600, 1700, 1800, and beyond before you know it. All right, that's it for me today. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.